What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso, joined as always by Connor Rodgers, our next to last post-game therapy of the year. I'm pre-assuming that next week will be a version of therapy. This was about as ugly as we expected, and we've been talking about this one likely to be ugly for a while. The New York Jets lose 40-14 to the Buffalo Bills. We're going to get into it as we always do. Connor, how you doing? How you feeling?
This was a tough one. I mean, you're sitting there and, in the first quarter, you're like, okay, they probably should be tied. And then you go into half down 12-0, and you're like, the dam hasn't really kind of broken here yet. And the Jets have just not been able to finish drives. And then, if you've seen it once, you've seen it a million times. In the second half, adversity strikes, and adversity created by their own fault. But a lot of people start playing for themselves, bad penalties, selfish team, not playing like a team, finger pointing, mostly from Rodgers today, and a coach that has truly no idea what he's doing. Honestly, just real conversation.
Could be like anywhere else in the world mentally, but yeah, at the game.
Like I know Jeff Ulbrich knows how to coach men and defense and game plan, but as an actual head coach of an NFL team, like in terms of like feeling out situations and clock management. And I mean, you could take probably 95% of people listening to this podcast and they would do the same exact job or the same exact flaws. That's how bad he is at that side of things right now. And we've defended him for a while. He's thrown into a tough situation, but it's like the Jets are embarrassing to watch. Honestly, yeah. It's you sit there and today was a day where you sat there and you were embarrassed to watch. And you were embarrassed for the guys that still care because they deserve better around them. A lot of interesting post-game comments that I thought were justified. Sauce Gardner said, hey, last year we had less talent and we were a lot better. And he thought they played as a team, better as a team. DJ Reed had some strong words after the game, and DJ Reed's played really hard this year. And, his frustrations are boiling over. It's pretty clear how before this game, how guys like Garrett Wilson feel and stuff. So you kind of said it best. Like you're waiting for it to end. You just want something different. You want something new. You want hope because you have none right now. You want certain players as far away from this franchise as humanly possible. Like if somebody called you from the Jets, anyone listening to this and said, hey, would you drive Michael Clemens to Seattle to play for them? I think everybody listening to this podcast would say yes. I will get in my car so I never have to see any of this ever again. That's the point you're at with this season right now.
Yeah, I think what's so frustrating is that, we've been teasing that we thought this one could be really ugly for a while. We thought it'd be the final nail in the run it back coffin just because – late season, Buffalo has something to play for. You figure it's going to be cold. The Jets are banged up. They just don't have the backbone to compete in a game like this. But in the back of your mind, you hope they prove you wrong. Like they come out, they go punch for punch with Buffalo. They hang around, they lose a tough game, and they show a little pride. And, I know this game was like 12-0 at halftime, but
the defense kind of did in the beginning.
Like a little bit. But as you said, once one or two things start to go wrong, everyone quits and everyone is out for themselves. And it's truly embarrassing to watch. And Clemens is an embodiment of a bigger problem, which is why we harp on it, because it was such an obvious to see problem that was coming that they did nothing about, that they still haven't rectified. And I actually really believe he has been the worst starting defensive player end to end, potentially in Jets franchise history, if you really looked at everything. And I can only speak from 87 onwards, but I just never seen anything like it. I've never seen a penalty that stupid. I've seen a lot of stupid Jet penalties, and not that it had any impact. It doesn't care. Does not care. And, Rodgers, 12 of 18, 2 interceptions, no touchdowns. And at the end of the day, like you look at the big picture stats, and people are tweeting me before the game that Rodgers and Allen have comparable stats, and it's like, what are we talking about here, man? Like, what are we talking about? I don't care if on paper Aaron Rodgers had a better season than Josh McCown in 2017. He's supposed to be competing with the elite quarterbacks in the league. He's averaging a touchdown pass and a half per game. The Jets with him have scored 10 or less points 4 different times. You could throw out any of the names that we like comb through, like, oh my God, it'd be horrible if they had to start Fields or Sam Howell or Tyrod if he gets hurt. What's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to be losing 40-0 through 3 quarters against Buffalo, which is what happened today after scoring 9 points at home against the Rams. Like, even Zach Wilson would score a touchdown a game. They go up there and get dog walked in Buffalo, but they would at least score a touchdown. And I'm not going to. I'll play, like, I don't want to play into the Tyrod stuff because I like Tyrod a lot. And I do think there's a really good chance he's their starting quarterback next year. He came in, went right down the field and scored 2 touchdowns. Now, it's deep garbage time. It's the Bills' backups. Do not put too much stock into that. And do I think he could play 17 games next year? Probably not. But I don't know. It was kind of noticeable. They went right down the field and scored. Garrett Wilson had a touchdown. Conklin had a touchdown. And he can move around a little bit. Yeah, and with Rodgers, like, of course, when things are right, you can still flip the ball down the field better than any Jets quarterback we've seen, period. But once the protection starts to break down, it gets ugly fast, and there are 2 more interceptions today and just didn't score touchdowns. And it's not always his fault, but at the end of the day, when we talk about the leadership infrastructure of the Jets, it's the general manager, it's the head coach, and it's the captains. And one of the captains is the quarterback. The quarterback is part of the leadership infrastructure. And if you're part of the leadership infrastructure and your team is 2-11 in their last 13 games and is just getting humiliated by their division rival, part of that falls onto you. It's not just the on-field stuff. Part of you is supposed to, like, not let that happen, right? Like, does Tom Brady let that happen? Does Stafford let that happen when they did their, like, extra chapters with these teams? Like, they find a way, even if they're undermanned, to hang around and be competitive. And the Jets they're playing like they want the season to end. And listen, we all share that feeling watching these games, like, just get it over with and let's see where this draft pick is going to land. And we can talk about that a little more. But from a film perspective and, like, what happened on the field today, I don't really know, like, what we learned. Like, there was no Olu Fashanu. Morgan Moses gets banged up. Carter Warren and Max Mitchell can't really play. We knew that already. I thought Brees showed a little juice. Garrett showed a little juice. That's always encouraging. Devontae looks hurt. Sauce is still clearly banged up. And they just don't belong on the same field as the Bills. They're not coached to the same level. They don't have the same talent level. They have no business being on the same field as them. So it was as ugly as expected. And now, the Dolphins will have something to play for next week. Let's see when that game lands. But the Jets are highly likely to be a 4-13 team that beat the Mac Jones Jaguars by a touchdown, the Will Levis Titans by a touchdown, barely, the Jacoby Brissett Gerard Mayo Patriots, and then had the 1 half against Houston, which is basically the only thing you can point to. And Houston is the Matt Schwab Texans, and they're going to get wiped in the first round anyway, so that's not like a huge win to be beating your chest over. They're just a bad team, unfortunately, and I just think with the Rodgers stuff, the more of a clean break you can have, the better when you have a situation like this. After the Dolphins and Jaguars game, was there a world where the Jets could have went out, beat the Rams at home, went punch for punch with Buffalo and lost 38-35, and then beat Miami to close the season, and the conversation feels like it's changing a little bit? Sure. This went the complete opposite way. They've scored, with Rodgers, 9 points in 2 games. Like, anybody can do that. Whoever the Browns, they don't punt. They gain yards, but they throw interceptions when they cross the 50-yard line. They don't get it on 4th down, or they get a delay of game. And I blame Rodgers as much as Ulbrich for that. Know who your coach is by this point. You're Aaron Rodgers. Don't let the delay of game happen. Call timeout or call a play faster. It's just, like, ridiculous stuff that is happening in Week 17. Is there anything else I missed on this mess of a game?
I think, there's a lot of people, understandably, and I said for a while, I'm like, whoever the new GM and head coach is, that should be the people that decide if Rodgers is here or not next season. I completely retract that at this point. If you hire somebody that thinks Rodgers should be here next season, then you hired the wrong person. That's how bad this looks right now. He's not playing well. He's old. He's injured. Like, that's how it goes, man. Amazing career. Amazing player. It's frustrating when you watch, and it was interesting because he framed it differently in his press conference after the game, but he was clearly mad at Yeboah on the 3rd and 1 where he rolled out. He could have just ran for a first down, but if he just lobbed the ball to Yeboah scores on 3rd and 1, and he throws a missile right at his ass cheek, and it's like nobody's going to catch that ball. And then he looked mad at him. Although in the post-game presser, he kind of had a classic Rodgers, like, long way of words where he didn't seem that mad at him. Then I said this on post-game to kind of show the Jets absolutely, zagging while everybody's zigging, right? Like the Jets playing 4D chess. when you're in that territory and you know you're going to go for it on fourth down, if you get to fourth down, nobody throws the ball on third down and then runs it on fourth. All the good teams run the ball on third because theoretically, if you're a good team, you think you can get the 1 yard. But hey, it's the NFL. Like sometimes you do lose. So say you don't get the yard on the 3rd and 1 run, then you throw it on fourth down. The Jets, no, it was funny because when they ran the play action, it was like a fullback belly play action, something I've wanted them to do in short yard scenarios instead of the stupid shotgun slow run
with Conklin at fullback.
So when they did the play action fullback belly, I was like, oh, that's a good idea. Like just fall forward for the yard and you got it. But then he faked it and it was a good fake. And then he starts rolling. I'm like, okay, he can just run for it. And when he throws it, I'm like, Yeboah's wide open. And he misses him. It was just hilarious that there was 3 avenues to it working on 3rd and 1. And they blew all 3. And then on fourth down, they do the classic, hey, we're in shotgun. Our short yardage back is on the field. And we're going to run a really slow build.
Right in the A gap.
Right in the A gap that you're going to be able to stop. So did we learn stuff today? I think if you didn't know, you learned how good Olu Fashanu is because, man, Max Mitchell and Carter Warren are a drop-off. It's fallen off a cliff. When those guys come in, and here's the thing, the Bills don't have good edge rushers. They don't. They play like relatively fundamental football as a defense, but they're not this pass rush demon team at all. It's a big complaint with Bills fans I see all the time. And when Morgan Moses left the game, it was like the floodgates were open. Rodgers didn't stand a chance back there, and they got to know with those guys out there at tackle. And thanks, Joe Douglas. Nice picks on both of those. A nice parting gift. Is that you got to play some quick game, like throw some screens. Rodgers is dropping back on these deep drops with those guys at tackle and just getting teed off on. So we didn't learn a lot. I think that, I mean, it's the same story. The Jets come out, the run game looks pretty decent. I had a funny story about the run game. I do 3 bets for SMY every pregame show, and I've gone 2-1 basically every week for like 2 months right now. And everyone started listening like, oh, 2-1, like that's good. And yes, I'm happy with that. But now I've had this elusive, I can't sweep, and it's always the Jets' fault. So the way it's structured is because it's a segment, it's also entertainment. The Jet bet, the whatever you want to call it, like the opposing team's bet that we call like the enemy bet or whatever, and then the One Nation wager, which is I can pick anything I want. It's so easy to hit the other team's bet because I know what the other team's going to do to the Jets. I hit that all the time. Today was Bills team total over 27.5. I was like, let's try something different. Let's try something different. That was easy. One Nation wager. I like the Raiders to win today. They did. But the Jets, I was going into it thinking Rodgers passing yards. Then I was following the weather all weekend. And I was like, no, absolutely not. And I switched to Brees over 49.5 rushing. I'm sitting there, I'm going, yes, he's been on a pitch count, but he's healthy. It's 49.5 rushing yards for one of the best running backs in football against a Bills run defense that's not any good. He's like breezing to it in the first quarter and a half. And then you don't see Brees Hall ever get a carry ever again. Yeah. So, and this isn't me complaining about my betting. It's tying in that the Jets don't consistently do things well. And getting away from Brees was an example.
Yeah. How many receptions did Brees get to have today after he caught one on the first drive for like 15 yards or whatever it was?
It's amazing when they design a pass to him and it's the easiest 11 yards you'll ever see, and then you never see it again. They even threw Conklin a tight end screen. Downing, it's so hard to actually evaluate Downing because you never, and I texted you guys in this group chat, like when the Audible King came out of the game, and yes, it was against backups, but Tyrod was doing normal offense things and like just running the play that Downing was calling, and it was like, this looks like a normal offense. It's so hard to evaluate Downing, but I think at times he has the right idea, and I think Rodgers has so much control and doesn't want to do certain things. And I'm not saying Downing's good or Rodgers is terrible. I'm just saying, like, this is what the Jets are. They're the AAU team comp. You know, Devontae wants 1,000 yards again. Rodgers wants his 500 touchdown. And nobody's having fun watching it. Nobody's having fun watching it. Like, we want to see Garrett Wilson. We want to see Brees Hall. Where you're at the point where if you're – this is like the big media spin now. And I got it for a couple weeks, and now I hope nobody ever has this as a topic again. the whole, well, Aaron Rodgers might be the Jets' best quarterback next year. Like, that's the best option they have. This conversation isn't about Rodgers having a couple decent games behind the Jets' improved offensive line since Olu came in for a couple weeks. The conversation is Rodgers the conversation is they need to turn the page. This didn't work. It's a toxic environment. It's not going to work, no matter how you slice it. And I think the Jets have won 4 games. Like, what fucking difference does it make? So you're telling me, hey, if you get a real coach, which I don't know why one would come here if that's the condition, and Rodgers is healthy at 42, that, you know what? You might win 9 games and sneak into the playoffs. Wouldn't you rather just have a bridge quarterback? Say you win 6 or 7, and the Jets' standard should be higher, and I think they're talented enough that they can win more games than that. Win 7 or 8 games and build going forward where guys are in an environment that they're happy in and they're growing in and they're getting better, rather than, oh man, like, how can we compile for Rodgers and Devontae today? And when Kenny Yeboah has a 200-mile-per-hour fastball thrown off his ass cheek, the quarterback isn't yelling at him. Or on the quick game, Carter Warren is blocking Rousseau. Rousseau's like 6'7", and Rodgers just quick game throws it right into Rousseau, tips it up, and it's picked by the D lineman because it's a quick game throw to Devontae, who's in the slot. Everybody knew where the ball was going.
Takes limited scouting.
Yeah, everyone's just tired of it, and there's no argument for Rodgers to be here next year. The Jets tried. It didn't work. It's time to move on to literally anything else.
1 target for Breece Hall today, which he caught. More targets for Kenny Yeboah, Allen Lazard, and Isaiah Davis than Breece Hall, who every time he gets the ball thrown, I think coming into this game, he had 70 targets and caught 53 of them. And, it was well over 500 yards receiving or whatever it is. It just blows my mind every week. And the press conferences, they ask all these questions and they're talking about the 500. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't care as a Jets fan. Like, he's not a Jets player.
Because I had this convo today in the newsroom. Do you want it to happen? Because I don't. Like, I don't. If it happens,
I'm worried they're going to bring him back if it doesn't happen. Yeah.
No, I'm not going to be mad if it happens. I literally will not care. Like, I'll just be like, I'll shrug or barely even give it attention. But if you had to ask me, like, if you got to pick, I don't even want it to happen, because it's like, it's literally the Lieutenant Dan at the New Year's bar scene with all the confetti falling on him, and he's just sitting there staring miserable while everybody around him is celebrating that he doesn't give a shit about.
Yeah, they're going to be down like 20-3 against Miami in front of 18 people at MetLife, and he's going to throw it to Devontae, and it's like, cool, that's awesome. But like, for me, like, listen, Rodgers is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's been fun to watch his whole career. He's played 17 games for the Jets. So him breaking this record as a Jets fan, like, I don't really care. He's not one of my favorite Jets. He's not one of my favorite players. I'm a Jets fan. I do a Jets podcast. I have a Jets website. I'm not an Aaron Rodgers fan or an Aaron Rodgers podcast. It's cool, sure, but it's like not that cool. It's like whatever. It's not like he's breaking. Yeah. It's also not like breaking like the all-time record for touchdown passes. It's just like an arbitrary number. So I'm just tired of hearing the team talk about it. And I'm sure a lot of people in the locker room are like, dude, we're 4-12. We do not care about you throwing your 500th touchdown when you threw 475 of them with a different team and threw the last 25 of them here. So it's just like, it's a dead talking point. And I can literally see the Jets. This would be very Jets. Like, as soon as he throws number 500, next week, just pull him out of the game and have Tyrod play the rest of the game. And he's like, that's it. I'm done. I'm going to retire. I've seen enough. And they just move past it. And
maybe I'm rooting for him to get it if it means he'll be like, you know what, I had a good career. I'm going to walk off into the sunset. Like, we're good here.
Part of me still thinks that very shortly after the season, he is going to make the first move and proactively say he wants to step away for a bit and retire. And I can see him changing his mind over the summer and doing the cat and mouse game. Do the Steelers want me? Do the Titans want me? Did someone get hurt in training camp? Do they want me? And we've seen this movie happen with quarterbacks and other professional athletes before. I feel like he is not the kind of guy who's going to sit on his hands while the Jets finish their GM and head coach search. And then the first question the GM and head coach has to answer at their intro presser is, well, what are you going to do about Aaron? Do the Jets really want that to dominate the intro press conference? Does Rodgers want that to dominate the intro press conference? Maybe. But it feels like I don't know, it might behoove all parties to have it wrapped up in some shape or form before you do the big turning of the page press conference with your new football leadership infrastructure. So I tend to think with how bad it's gone this year and how toxic it seems in that locker room right now, that everyone's going to want a relatively quick resolution. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Rodgers is going to want to drag this out. Maybe the Jets are very much going to be like, we're going to fully let the new GM and head coach make the decision. We're not going to touch it. But that feels like it can make for a very weird and annoying January and early February. So if you had to guess right now, the Jets' final game is going to be this Saturday or Sunday against Miami. We'll be recording this podcast next weekend, likely about a loss. How many days after that are we going to get some kind of clarity about Rodgers' status, or weeks or months?
I don't think they'll want to touch that until everyone's hired, right? And now this is a really tough one to diagnose because you have an owner that spent a lot of money on this team and is not happy, and when rich people, like, things don't go their way, really any kind of person, but especially rich people, from what I could tell, they get a little petty or spiteful or angry, and justifiably so, in this situation, not in all situations, where it's like rage quitting. You're rage cutting him, and because you're angry. Now, I almost wonder, do you use Rodgers' situation as part of your interview process, right? And it doesn't mean that you're actually going to do that when you hire the person, but you ask, hey, like, we got a Hall of Fame quarterback on our books. How would you handle this situation? It's an interesting interview question. I would be curious how smart people answer that question. So, no, I think the Jets probably want to focus on their search right now, first and foremost, and want to hear from other football people on the state of their roster, and he is a part of that. But you never know. I could see, he's a guy that's going to want to have control, and that's why he does McAfee. And it's, by the way, it just puts me to the sidebar. For those that watch all the games with the volume on, it is very clear the announcers, like, how much they get stuff from him if you listen very carefully. I won't go too into it, and I'm not blaming. That's part of the job when you're a color guy. You meet with the quarterback before the game, and you feel them out and hear that. Like, sometimes announcers are accidentally saying things I'm noticing, and I go, that's from Aaron Rodgers. And if you listen closely, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not, give it one more shot, although one game left, it might not mean anything. That's all I'll say. So he's a very tactical human. I don't think he'll like being left hanging in this situation, although it's something he's done before. And I think the Jets will play it on their own time and their own accord. And I think that why it doesn't matter, it's not a distraction, is because everybody's going to be so invested in the coaching and GM search for the Jets that we're not sitting there every day going, what's going to happen with Rodgers? What's going to happen with Rodgers? What's going to happen with Rodgers? You just care about who they hire. And then when they hire that person, you'll know pretty quickly, I would think, what his future is. And the only counter argument is, do you want those hires doing a press conference and then they open up the reporters to ask questions, and the second question is like, what about Aaron Rodgers? And like, it's not really a situation that you want your new hire having to politically answer, but that might be part of the job out of the gate.
Once again, the Jets offseason will be far more fascinating than their regular season, which true. This is what we're built for. This is our real season is about to start here because, we're going to rip through. We're going to have a normal schedule this week. We'll have War Room. We'll have the pod. And once the season ends, and I'll have a little year-end note that kind of puts a bow on everything, we got the GM, we got the head coach, we got scouting combine. Obviously, Connor will be there with a few other people from our team. We got the Rodgers decision. We got the NFL draft. We got Streets of Fire dropping in February. It's like the real busy season. It's the real like sprint. And one of these years it will change. And busy, like it's always busy, especially with this year. But like November, December, January should really be the best time of the year for Jet fans. But the most interesting stuff, again, is about to hit. It's going to be fascinating to see what breaks with this organization the next 6 weeks because it could go a million different directions. And it's still very much up in the air. They could pick anywhere from 9th to 2nd, depending on how next week goes. We don't know who's going to get fired and who not get fired around the league. The Raiders, the Patriots, the Giants, all these things are going to have a domino effect on Can the Jets get Mike Vrabel? Can the Jets get Liam Cohn? Can the Jets get Aaron Glenn? Can the Jets get any of the other Flores, any of the other guys that everyone's excited about, most particularly Vrabel? So still a lot to learn in week 18, particularly from a draft position, because there's
the
a
draft
big,
pick. Yeah.
I mean, big difference between picking 3rd and 9th, without question. The Jets are currently 6th or 7th, depending on what happens with the Falcons game tonight. But the Dolphins have something to play for now. And when you look at the teams in front of them, they are playing a lot of teams who are resting people. So I think it's almost more likely at this point that the Jets will pick 4th or 5th than 6th or 7th. We'll see. And I don't want to break anyone's brains, but it's impossible to look at this and not be like, wow, if the Jets just would have lost to the Jaguars, they could have been picking 1st or 2nd. This happens yet again. But let's see. If they're picking in the top 4, all things considered, especially with now who could be picking ahead of them since the Giants decided to win today, it's kind of wide open. Unreal. That was a shocking outcome. So a lot to be figured out. Any final words, CR, before we hand the studio over to Jake and Paul for another Guys, which we'll hit tomorrow, and then we'll be back to answer all the Discord questions we got on War Room.
Yeah, there's a lot of scenarios with the draft, so we'll cross that bridge when we get there. If you're really into hearing them all laid out and how it could go and what's likely, and Trevor and I on Stock Exchange, we're going to do this earlier this week, basically like the top 10. Like, here's what has to happen. We'll do at least 10 minutes on the Jets, I'm sure, and like all those scenarios. So that's very in the weeds draft. Joe and I here will, when we know the pick, we'll talk.
Draft guide season.
Yeah, I'll give you like every player that's in play. I mean, all the way up to, hey, holy crap, they're picking 2nd. Like, are they going to take a quarterback? Or we're going to be able to break all that down. But there's so much variance right now, or volatility, I should say, of where they can end up. And I think that's good. I think for a while we were kind of resigned to being like, the Jets are going to be picking like 8th or 9th again, and, or 8th or 9th around there. And that's kind of boring. And now you look around and you're like, oh man, like a lot of teams are playing rested starters next week where the Jets could slide up, and the combo is going to be fascinating. And but what matters right now is this search and where it goes. And, there's I don't know. This team, man, like there's so much gutting that needs to be done. And it's not gutting where the Jets are like a terrible roster. They have foundational pieces from Olu to Garrett to Brees to Sauce to Quinnen. But it just feels like there's rot on this roster. And I don't know about you, Joe, but like part of me will feel almost relief I don't like seeing people lose their jobs or like, but like there's a big part of me that there's going to be some relief when I hear some names either outright cut or just not brought back. It's been that kind of year. Like there are outlaws on this roster that are playing for themselves, and it is the guys that are trying to be part of the solution notice, and that you just got to get them out the door. And this isn't me piling on Rodgers. I'm not even thinking of Rodgers in this scenario, which is wild to say. I don't think Rodgers is fully playing for himself. I'm talking about a lot of guys on defense that are here that are not actual Jets. That it'll just feel better. Like I can legitimately give myself a little hope again with the right coach and just a team that cares almost, right, about playing as a unit. And that's why this team, we were texting and half joking but half not, like this team is rivaling 2016. It's different because I like some players on this team a lot. Like I'm a fan of Garrett Wilson. I'm a fan of Breece Hall. I'm a really big fan of this offensive line. Olu all the way across to Morgan Moses. Like these guys play hard. They don't get a lot of credit, but there are so many players and like the lack of coaching that you're just disgusted putting this team on television right now. Where 2016, I think there was a lot more to unpack there, but it's sad that it's a conversation, right?
It's right there. I mean,
it's really disappointing. It's a really big disappointment.
When it's all said and done, I think there's a decent chance they can be right there. And for today's game, I'll wrap with this. Like, obviously, I usually sequester myself away to watch these games because I want to watch them very intensely. I had a good friend's kid's first birthday party today. So the party was like 11:30 to 1 up in Westchester, your neck of the woods. So It was right across the street from a brewery. Obviously, I could get the game on my phone. I called the brewery like a madman. The only person called me like, "Hey, you're gonna have the Jet game." I'm like, "Yes, we can put the Jet game on for you." The only
They're
person
probably,
I
what the
ever
hell is wrong with
who
you?
wants to watch the Jet game. So it was important that me and my family were at the party. We went, got over there, left a little early, and watched the game. And everyone came over. It was kind of watching the first half in the Giants game. People leave as they're normal humans, and it was like late in the third quarter. Like when it was like 26-0, and I was watching it with JJ. It's just like there's like a sad like live music band playing, and I'm like, how is this what this season is right now? If you would have told me before the season that for this Jets Bills game, like in my mind, I was like, I'm going to that game because it's going to be for the AFC East. Like when Vinny Testaverde won in Buffalo in 1998 with like a bomb to Dedrick Ward, and here I am listening to like a crappy acoustic version of Zombie while JJ sits in my lap. Like, are you rooting for the Jets to win or lose today? I'm like, it doesn't really matter either way. At this point, they're going to lose, buddy. It's 33-0, so it's okay. And then it was ugly. It was ugly. I knew this one, unfortunately, was going to be ugly. It kind of came through in our picks and some of the the bets we were texting about. Next week's a little hard to read. We'll see what happens with when the game is and if Tua is playing. But I wouldn't be. I don't lack confidence in the Jets' ability to find a way to lose next week, is what I'll say. And it will be for the best next week for the potential draft implications. I don't think Miami's making the playoffs, right? And if they do, they're going to get the doors blown off of them again in the first round.
Like,
so
who cares?
Whatever. I think, unfortunately, our buddy Bo Nix will probably get him because the Chiefs are going to rest everyone, but let's see.
But it'd be funny if they don't and the Bengals do.
Yes, it'd be. I mean, that's the one silver line. I think the scenario, actually, which I didn't really get until today, is that if the Broncos lose, but the Dolphins win, the Dolphins are in before the Bengals.
Right.
So there's kind of like, yes, I guess knocking the Dolphins out of the playoffs would be nice and fun, right? Even though it's like the 7th seed in the AFC East, but I don't even think it's going to come to that. Let's see what the games are scheduled.
Top 5.
Yeah, well, I want to pick like 4th.
Honest.
Yeah, I want to pick like 3rd or 4th. That would be nice and exciting and have a bigger impact on the team getting better faster. So thank you everyone for listening. Flight plan, other guys tomorrow, podcast Tuesday, War Room Wednesday. Happy New Year. A couple days left. Buy one, get one free at badlandstoj.com. Plenty of more announcements coming, but you guys already know. We got the votes in for the live show. It looks like North Jersey is narrowly beating New York City right now.
It's been a good
We haven't closed the poll yet. It's like 39% to 35% with Long Island and Westchester getting blown out of the water. But we'll see. So look out for that April 11th. Thank you everyone for listening. We'll talk to you soon.